Finally, in the School of Athens, we're going to look at two particulars in the painting, points of intersection between the medium, the material of buon fresco and its painting, and the message of the painting, what the painting is saying. In those two cases, we're going to get at something essential about this idea that the way Raphael painted and what he was thinking were all of a piece. Now, one of the more famous figures in the painting, partly because he's thought to represent Michelangelo, who was painting again the Sistine ceiling while Raphael's working on this, is the figure of Heraclitus at the bottom of the stairs, resting on a block, pensive. The Italians call him il pensieroso, like the thinker, like Rodin's thinker. In fact, he's probably a model for Rodin's thinker. Heraclitus wasn't there in the original painting. He's not in the original cartoon that's in Milan. And he was added later by Raphael, and we know this from recent restoration, by actually chipping out the fresco that Raphael painted and inserting this figure where there was essentially a blank space in the painting. And he deliberately decided to add him not in what's called secco or dry, so painted on top of the plaster, but he actually replastered and refrescoed it so that he was buon fresco like everything else in the painting. Now, it's a little hard to imagine, but here's an image of without the figure of Heraclitus. You see a flight of stairs below Plato and Aristotle. Remember I said, think of this painting as, in a way, a still photograph from a film. Now we're going to hit the play button and the film is going to start up again. Plato and Aristotle are going to start walking. Their feet are moving. They're walking towards the stairs, and they're going to descend the stairs. Aristotle has in front of him the figure of Diogenes, the kind of sort of disheveled, semi-nude figure sprawled out on the stairs. And he's going to have to sort of step around Diogenes to get to the bottom of the stairs. You have to always imagine that Plato and Aristotle are going to keep talking as they walk, and they're going to stay together as they walk. Now, Plato doesn't really have very much in front of him that is an impediment to him. He has a clear path. And it's true about Plato that, again, he's this source for, in many ways, what becomes Renaissance intellectual thought that's different from medieval thought, which was so rooted and deeply founded on Aristotle. But in a way, Raphael can't make this too easy for Plato. And so he inserts the figure of Heraclitus to also force Plato to deviate a little bit, to keep going straight ahead. That both Plato and Aristotle descending the stairs have to move around some obstacles to get down to the bottom of the stairs. And ultimately, if we believe Monsignor Timothy Verdon's interpretation of the painting, to keep walking as we would to the disputa, the image of theology on the opposite wall. Now, the other aspect of this that I find so wonderful and in a certain case actually fun is that, remember we said that Aristotle was painted all in one day, a single giornata. Now if you look to the left, Plato was not painted all in one day. Raphael painted his head with the clouds, the sky behind him, and his body a second day. So Raphael essentially said Plato's head is in the clouds, which is something that the papal librarian Inghirami, the great preacher at the Vatican, the head of the Augustinian order, Giles of Viterbo, and even Julius II themselves, when they saw this, they must have thought that was just hilarious. You have to imagine that, the day that Raphael painted Plato, his head anyway, the head was there floating in the clouds and there was no body. He was a disembodied head. And that's Raphael using the material, the technique, the structure of the fresco process to say something about Plato and something different about Plato than Aristotle. It's only something that would have been available for the day that he left the body incomplete, and the next day when it was painted, that idea disappears and no one's going to go and search for the giornate and the fresco. But for that one brief moment, there was this kind of humorous little incident in the fresco that was deeply embedded in the idea of how Raphael understood Plato. And in terms of a portrait, there are some who say that Plato is meant to represent Leonardo da Vinci, who again Raphael knew in Florence before he came to Rome and was now in Rome again. So, if this is Leonardo, then Raphael is also saying that just like Michelangelo is melancholic like Heraclitus, Leonardo has his head in the clouds like Plato. So I hope over the arc of these presentations, you've obviously gotten to meet Raphael, learned something about fresco, and looked a little more closely at the School of Athens and thought about the relationship between the medium and the message in a way that you might not have otherwise. We haven't by any means unpacked all the richness of this painting, and for that there are readings. You should listen to the BBC discussion of Plato and Aristotle in the Renaissance. But I do hope that you've understood some way in which Raphael's mind and hand were all working towards the same end. Michelangelo, years after Raphael died, when he was lamenting the fact that he wasn't in the mood to paint, said, "You don't paint with your hand, you paint with your mind." And for Raphael, it is true that he obviously painted with his hand physically, but he also painted with his mind, with his head. And everything he does as a painter is thoughtful. What he's representing and how he represents it is deeply thoughtful. And I hope you have a more thoughtful understanding of this great fresco and what the Renaissance was doing.